The wind howled through the gaps in the wooden walls like a wounded animal, rattling the shutters of the small cabin that sat alone on the edge of Desert Hollow. New Mexico. Clara Whitmore pulled her woolen shawl tighter around her shoulders as she stirred the dying embers in the fireplace. Another winter had come early to this forsaken land, and with it came the familiar ache of loneliness that had settled in her bones 7 years ago when Thomas died. She was 32 now, though the mirror showed a woman who looked older. The harsh sun and bitter winds of the frontier had etched fine lines around her green eyes, and her once soft hands were now calloused from years of working the small homestead alone. Her auburn hair, which Thomas had loved to run his fingers through, was now always pulled back in a severe bun, practical and unadorned. The cabin creaked under the weight of fresh snow, and Clara moved to check the roof beams. Everything in this place required constant attention. The chicken coop needed new wire. The barn door hung crooked on its hinges, and the well pump froze every third night. She had learned to do it all herself, from splitting wood to mending fences, from butchering chickens to weaving cloth for the trading post down in town. Desert Hollow was barely a town at all, just a cluster of buildings huddled together against the vast emptiness of the high desert. The mountains rose dark and forbidding to the north, their peaks already white with snow that would not melt until late spring. Between her cabin and town stretched 3 miles of rough road that became nearly impassable when the winter storms rolled in. Clara added another log to the fire and settled into her chair with her weaving. The cloth she made brought in just enough money to keep her in coffee, flour, and bullets. The rest, vegetables from her garden, eggs from her chickens, and occasional game, she provided for herself. It was a hard life, but it was hers. She had fought to keep this land after Thomas died, fought the bank and the vultures who circled every widow's property. This patch of earth was all she had left of her husband, of the dreams they had shared when they come west from Missouri 8 years ago. The loom clicked steadily as she worked, the rhythm soothing in its predictability. Outside, the snow began to fall harder, muffling all sound except for the wind. She was so absorbed in her work that she almost missed the sound of horses. Clara froze, her hands stilling on the loom. Visitors were rare out here, especially after dark. Especially in weather like this. She reached for the Winchester rifle that always stood loaded beside the door, her heart beginning to race. Thomas had taught her to shoot, and she'd gotten better at it in the years since his death. A woman alone had to be ready for anything. The horses stopped just outside her gate. Clara moved to the window, peering through the frost-covered glass in the swirling snow. She could make out 2 figures dismounting. They moved slowly, as if exhausted, and one seemed to be supporting the other. A knock came at the door, not demanding, but tired, almost apologetic. Clara gripped the rifle tighter. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice steady despite her racing pulse. "We mean no harm, ma'am." The voice was deep, accented in a way she recognized. "Apache. My friend is hurt. We seek only shelter from the storm." Clara's mind raced. Apache warriors at her door. Every story she'd heard in town, every warning about savage raids and stolen women, came flooding back. But then she heard it, a soft groan of pain from the second man. She thought of Thomas, dying alone in the snow after the hunting accident. No one near to help him. She thought of the commandment to show mercy to strangers. "Are you armed?" she called back. "We have weapons, but we offer no threat. We will leave them outside if you wish." Clara considered. They could force their way in if they wanted. Her door wouldn't hold against 2 determined men. The fact that they asked spoke in their favor. "Leave your guns by the door. Step back where I can see you." She heard movement, the soft thud of items being placed on the porch, through the window. She watched them move back into the yard. The snow swirled around them, and she could see they wore traditional blankets over their clothes, both soaked through. The one being supported seemed barely conscious. Clara made her decision. She unbarred the door, keeping the rifle trained on them as she opened it. "Come in slowly. Any sudden moves and I'll shoot." The 2 men entered her home, bringing with them the smell of horses, leather, and snow. In the firelight, she got her first clear look at them. The conscious one was tall, perhaps 35, with sharp cheekbones and eyes so dark they seemed to swallow the light. His hair was long and black, tied back with a leather cord. He moved with careful grace despite his exhaustion, supporting his companion with surprising gentleness. The injured man was younger, maybe 25, with a friendlier face, even twisted in pain. Blood seeped through a makeshift bandage on his shoulder. "By the fire," Clara directed, still keeping the rifle ready. "What happened to him?" "Mountain cat," the older man said simply, easing his friend onto the rug before her hearth. 2 days ago, the wound went bad. Clara could see that, even from where she stood, she could smell the infection starting. She faced a choice: turn them out to die in the storm, or help them and risk everything. The injured man's eyes fluttered open, focusing on her with difficulty. "Pretty angel," he mumbled in English, attempting a smile. "Am I dead? Despite everything?" Clara felt her lips twitch. "Not yet," she said, making her decision. She leaned the rifle against the wall, still within reach. "I'll need hot water and clean cloth. Can you help?" The tall man nodded, relief flickering across his stoic features. "I am called Taza. This is Chayton. We are grateful." "I'm Mrs. Whitmore," Clara said, already moving to gather supplies. "Clara, let's see if we can keep your friend among the living." As she worked to clean Chayton's wound, Taza helped with quiet efficiency, fetching water, stoking the fire, following her directions without question. His presence filled the small cabin in a way that had nothing to do with his physical size. Clara found herself aware of his every movement, the controlled power in his hands as he wrung out bloody cloths, the way he murmured to his friend in their own language when Chayton cried out in pain. By the time she had cleaned and bandaged the wound, given Chayton some of her precious whiskey for the pain, and settled him on a pallet by the fire, the storm outside had become a full blizzard. There would be no leaving tonight, perhaps not for days. Clara served them cornbread and beans, the simple meal she had planned to stretch over 3 days. They ate gratefully, Taza helping Chayton with patient care. When they finished, an awkward silence fell. 3 strangers, trapped by weather and circumstance, the weight of all the unspoken history between their peoples hanging in the air. "You live alone," Taza observed. It wasn't quite a question. "My husband died 7 years ago," Clara said simply. "This is my land." He nodded, something like understanding in his dark eyes. "It is hard to be alone. You get used to it." Clara lied. Chayton, drowsy from the whiskey and exhaustion, mumbled something in Apache. Taza's lips quirked in what might have been amusement. "What did he say?" Clara asked. "He says you have a kind face, but sad eyes. He wonders why the white men let such a woman live alone." Clara snorted. "The white men don't let me do anything. This is my choice." Taza studied her with those penetrating eyes. "Yes," he said finally. "I see that." As the night deepened and Chayton fell into a fitful sleep, Clara found herself sitting across the fire from Taza, the first real company she'd had in months. He was nothing like the savage raiders of town gossip. He was quiet, watchful, careful. When he noticed her shivering, he added wood to the fire without being asked. When Chayton stirred restlessly, he was immediately at his friend's side, checking the bandage with gentle hands. "You've done this before," Clara observed. "Tended wounds. Too many times." Taza said quietly, "Your healing is good. Better than many white doctors I have seen. My mother was a midwife. She taught me some things before." Clara trailed off. Before she died, before Clara married Thomas and came west, before everything changed, the wind howled louder, and somewhere in the distance, she heard the crack of a tree branch breaking under the weight of snow. Winter had come early and fierce this year. She wondered if her chickens would survive the night, if the roof would hold, if the wood pile would last. The worries of a solitary life, made strange by the presence of these unexpected guests. "We will help," Taza said, as if reading her thoughts. "While we stay, with the wood, the animals, it is only fair." Clara looked at him sharply. "I didn't ask for payment. No, you asked for nothing. That is why I offer." They sat in silence then, the fire crackling between them, the storm raging outside. Clara found herself stealing glances at this strange, quiet man who had entered her life like a spirit from the storm. She noticed the scar along his jaw, the way his hands rested calmly on his knees, the stillness in him that spoke of hard-won peace. For the first time in 7 years, Clara Whitmore's house didn't feel empty. For the first time in 7 years, she wasn't sure if that was a blessing or a curse. The morning sun reflected blindingly off the fresh snow, turning Clara's small homestead into something from a fairy tale. She stood at the window, coffee mug warming her hands, watching Taza split wood in the yard. Each swing of the axe was precise, economical, the movements of a man who wasted nothing, not energy, not words, not time. Chayton sat bundled in blankets on the porch, his injury preventing him from helping, but his spirits considerably improved. "You swing that axe like an old grandmother. Taza!" he called out in accented English. "Mrs. Clara could probably do better." Taza didn't respond, just kept working. But Clara caught the slight shake of his head that might have been amusement. In the 3 days since they'd arrived, she'd learned that Taza spoke little but observed everything, while Chayton filled any silence with stories and gentle teasing. "Your friend seems much better," Clara said, stepping onto the porch with a fresh cup of coffee for Chayton. "Thanks to you," Chayton said, accepting the cup gratefully. "Taza said you have healing hands." He was right. Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks that had nothing to do with the cold. "It's just basic doctoring, nothing special." "To us, it is special," Chayton said, his usual playful demeanor turning serious for a moment. "Not many white women would open their door to Apache men. Even fewer would tend our wounds." The truth of it sat heavy between them. Clara had heard the stories, seen the aftermath of raids, knew the fear that ran deep on both sides. Yet here they were, sharing coffee on her porch like old neighbors. Not many Apache warriors would help a white widow with her chores, she countered. Chayton grinned. "Taza is not like most warriors. He thinks too much, feels too much. That's why I keep him around. Someone needs to make sure he doesn't disappear into his own head." Clara watched Taza stack the split wood neatly against the cabin wall. He'd already repaired the barn door, reinforced the chicken coop, and chopped enough wood to last her through 2 blizzards. All without being asked, all with that same quiet efficiency. That evening, as they gathered around her small table for supper, the domesticity of it struck Clara like a physical blow. 3 plates, 3 cups, conversation over a meal, things she hadn't experienced in so long she'd forgotten the comfort of them. "This stew is good," Taza said, the first words he'd spoken during the meal. "It's just rabbit and vegetables." Clara demurred. "The rabbit you shot yourself. The vegetables you grew and preserved." Taza observed, "You survive well alone." "She does everything well," Chayton added with his characteristic enthusiasm. "Shoots, cooks, heals. Probably dances, too. Some man will be very lucky." The silence that followed was deafening. Clara focused on her plate, feeling Taza's dark eyes on her. "I'm not looking for another husband," she said quietly. "Once was enough." "He was a fool to die and leave you," Chayton said bluntly. "Chayton," Taza warned softly. "No, it's all right," Clara said, surprising herself. "Thomas was hunting elk. There was an early snow, like this one. His horse spooked and threw him. Broke his leg badly. He tried to make it back, but—" She shrugged, the old pain dulled by time but never gone. "They found him 2 miles from home. If someone had been with him, if I had known to look sooner. Death comes when it comes." Taza said, "Guilt changes nothing." Their eyes met across the table, and Clara saw understanding there, the recognition of someone who had carried similar weights. "You've lost people too," she said. It wasn't a question. Taza nodded slowly. "My mother, my sister, many others. In the wars, some in war, some in peace. The result is the same." After supper, Chayton regaled them with a story about a trading post mishap involving a stubborn mule and a barrel of molasses. His animated telling had even Taza's stern mouth twitching toward a smile, and Clara found herself laughing, really laughing, for the first time in longer than she could remember. "You see," Chayton said triumphantly. "I told you she could laugh. It changes her whole face, like sunrise over the mountains." "You talk too much," Taza said, but there was fondness in it. "Someone has to talk, or you two would sit in silence until the snow melts." Chayton retorted. As Clara cleared the dishes, she was aware of Taza watching her. Not in a way that made her uncomfortable, but with that same steady observation he applied to everything. When she reached for a heavy pot of water on the stove, he was there, lifting it before she could. "I can manage," she said automatically. "I know," he replied, pouring the water into her wash basin anyway. They worked together in comfortable silence, her washing, him drying. Chayton dozed by the fire, his soft snores a oddly pleasant backdrop. The simple domesticity of it made Clara's chest tight with longing for things she'd thought buried with Thomas. "Why do you stay here?" Taza asked suddenly. "You have no family? No people in the towns?" Clara considered her answer. "This is my home. Thomas and I built it together. We cleared the land, raised the walls, dug the well. Every board, every stone has our sweat in it. How could I leave? The dead do not need houses," Taza said gently. "Maybe not, but the living need memories." He handed her the last dried plate. "Some memories are chains, and some are anchors," Clara countered. "They keep us from drifting away entirely." That night, as she lay in her bed listening to the wind and the occasional murmur of conversation from the main room where the men slept, Clara allowed herself to admit what she'd been fighting for days. She was going to miss them when they left. The noise, the company, the help. Yes, but more than that, she would miss the way Taza moved through her space without disturbing it, the way his presence somehow made the cabin feel more like a home than it had in years. The next morning brought clearer skies but bitter cold. As Clara fed the chickens, she noticed Taza standing at the edge of her property, looking north toward the mountains. "Planning your route?" she asked, joining him. "The passes will be dangerous now," he said. "But we have imposed too long." "You haven't imposed. Chayton still needs rest, and there's work here if you want it. I can't pay much, but—" "You have paid us already," Taza interrupted. "With shelter, food, kindness. That's not payment. That's just being human." He turned to look at her fully then, something shifting in his expression. "You say that as if it's common. It is not." They stood there in the bright, cold morning, and Clara felt something change between them. The careful distance he'd maintained seemed to shrink, and she found herself noticing things she shouldn't, the way the sun caught the angles of his face, the grace in his stillness, the warmth in eyes she'd thought cold. "I should check on Chayton," she said, breaking the spell. "Yes," he agreed, but neither moved for a long moment. That evening, as they sat around the fire, Chayton produced a small flute from his pack. "Music," he announced, "is good medicine." He played simple melodies, haunting and sweet. Clara found herself transported back to childhood, to her mother singing while she worked, to Thomas whistling as he plowed. When tears slipped down her cheeks, she didn't wipe them away. "Now you've done it," Taza said to Chayton. Made her cry. "Happy tears," Chayton insisted, then looked at Clara. "Yes?" "Yes," she admitted. "I'd forgotten. It's been so quiet here for so long. Then we make noise while we can." Chayton declared and launched into a livelier tune. Later, as Chayton slept, Clara and Taza sat by the dying fire. The silence between them had changed over the days, becoming comfortable, almost intimate. "He cares for you deeply," Clara observed, nodding toward Chayton. "We have ridden together many years. He is my brother in all but blood, and yet you're very different. He reminds me to find joy. I remind him to find wisdom. Together, we survive." "Is that what you're doing now? Just surviving?" Taza was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. For a long time. Yes, now. I am not certain. Their eyes met across the dimming firelight, and Clara felt her heart skip. This was dangerous territory, this unnamed thing growing between them. She was a white widow. He was an Apache warrior. The world would never understand, never accept. But in this moment, in this snow-locked cabin far from the judgment of others, Clara found she didn't care what the world thought. She only cared about the way he looked at her, like she was something worth seeing. The ice on the creek had grown thick enough to walk on, and Taza was teaching Clara how to read the signs beneath where the water still moved, where fish might gather, where the ice was deceptive and dangerous. His hand hovered near her elbow as she stepped carefully across the frozen surface, ready to steady her, but not assuming she needed it. "See there?" He pointed to a dark spot beneath the ice. "The water runs deeper. Never trust such places." Clara nodded, filing the information away with all the other survival skills she'd learned since Thomas died. But her attention kept drifting from the lesson to the teacher, the patient way he explained things, the careful distance he maintained even while instructing her. "You're a good teacher," she said as they made their way back to solid ground. "My grandfather taught me to read the water. I only pass on what was given to me." They walked back toward the cabin in companionable silence, their boots crunching in the snow. The past week had fallen into a routine that felt dangerously comfortable. Morning coffee shared in peaceful quiet, days filled with necessary work and unexpected laughter, evenings by the fire with Chayton's stories and music. It was a life Clara hadn't known she'd been starving for until it was placed before her. As they approached the cabin, Chayton waved from the porch where he was mending a bridle. His shoulder had healed well, though Clara still insisted on checking it daily. "Successful fishing?" he called out. "Ice fishing," Clara corrected. "We'll try when it warms a bit." "Always teaching," Chayton said to Taza with a knowing grin. "Though I wonder who learns more, the student or the teacher." Taza gave him a look that would have quelled a lesser man, but Chayton just laughed and went back to his work. That afternoon, while the men tended to the horses, Clara found herself standing before her small mirror, studying her reflection. When had the harsh lines around her eyes softened? When had she started leaving her hair a little looser, allowing a few auburn strands to frame her face? She touched her cheek where the winter sun and wind had brought color back to her complexion. "Foolish woman," she whispered to her reflection, but she didn't pull her hair back into its severe bun. When she emerged to start supper, she found Taza alone by the woodpile, sharpening her axe with smooth, practiced strokes. "Where's Chayton?" she asked, checking his snares. "He insists on contributing to the pot." Clara smiled. "He's proud. All men are proud. Some just hide it better." She moved closer, watching the rhythmic motion of the whetstone. "And you? What are you proud of?" Taza paused in his work, considering. "I was proud of my skill in war. Now," he resumed sharpening, "now I take pride in smaller things. A well-set trap, a horse well-trained, a friend who heals instead of hurts. That's not smaller, that's bigger." He looked up at her then, and the intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. "You see much?" "Clara Whitmore." The way he said her name, careful and deliberate, sent warmth through her that had nothing to do with the afternoon sun. "I see a man who's trying to build something new from the ashes of something old," she said softly. "I recognize it because I'm doing the same." They stood there, the only sound the whisper of stone on steel, until Chayton's cheerful whistling announced his return. 3 rabbits hung from his belt, and his face was bright with success. "Tonight we feast," he declared, "and perhaps our lovely hostess will tell us some of her own stories, instead of always listening to mine." Over dinner, Clara found herself sharing memories she'd kept locked away. Her childhood in Missouri, her mother's gentle hands and healing ways, meeting Thomas at a church social, their decision to go west. "He was so certain," she said, smiling at the memory. "Said we'd build an empire out here, start with cattle, move into horses, maybe even open a trading post. He had such grand dreams. Dreams are important, Chaitin said, even if they don't come true as planned. What were your dreams? Clara asked him. Chaitin's usual jovial expression turned thoughtful. To be a great warrior, like my father. To count many coups. Steal many horses, win honor for my people. He shrugged. But the world changed. Now I dream of simpler things. Good friends, full belly, warm fire. Maybe someday a woman who doesn't run away when I sing. They all laughed at that. But Clara noticed Taza watching his friend with something like sadness. Later, as had become their custom, Clara and Taza lingered by the fire after Chaitin retired. These quiet hours had become precious to her. These moments when Taza's careful walls lowered just a fraction. You worry for him, Clara observed. For Chaitin, he adapts easier than most, but sometimes I fear he gives up too much of himself to fit into this new world. And you? How do you fit? I don't, Taza said simply. I exist between worlds, too changed by war to go back to the old ways, too Apache to embrace the new. Clara understood that feeling, being caught between what was and what might be, without thinking. She reached out and placed her hand over his where it rested on his knee. He went utterly still. I'm sorry. She began to withdraw, but his hand turned, catching hers. They sat frozen, hands barely touching. The moment balanced on a knife's edge. Then, slowly, his thumb brushed across her knuckles, a touch so light she might have imagined it. This is not wise, he said, but didn't let go. No, Clara agreed, her voice barely a whisper. It's not. Your people would not understand. My people would not understand. I know. You would lose everything. Your home, your place in town. Perhaps your life. I know, she said again, and gently pulled her hand away. The loss of contact felt like losing warmth itself. I don't expect anything. Taza, I just wanted you to know that you're not as alone between worlds as you think. He studied her face in the firelight, and she wondered what he saw there. You are braver than any warrior I have known, he said finally. Or more foolish. Perhaps they are the same. The next morning brought a change in weather, warmer air from the south meeting the cold, creating a thick fog that turned the world into a white void. Clara could barely see the barn from the cabin door. Good day to stay close, Chaitin declared, clearly pleased at the excuse to remain by the fire. But the horses needed tending. So Taza ventured into the fog. Clara watched him disappear into the white, then busied herself with indoor tasks, trying not to think about how natural it had become to track his movements, to listen for his return. When an hour passed with no sign of him, worry began to gnaw at her. The barn wasn't that far, but in fog this thick, even familiar ground could become treacherous. I'm going to check, she told Chaitin, reaching for her coat. He knows how to handle weather, Chaitin said, but she caught the concern in his eyes. Clara stepped into the fog, the world immediately shrinking to a few feet in any direction. She called out, her voice swallowed by the mist. Following the fence line, she made her way slowly toward the barn, her heart beating faster with each step. She found him by the well, disoriented, a gash on his forehead bleeding freely. Taza! She rushed to him, steadying him as he swayed. Ice, he said, gesturing vaguely. Didn't see. Clara got her shoulder under his arm, taking his weight. Come on, let's get you inside. Together they stumbled through the fog, Clara navigating by instinct and memory. By the time they reached the cabin, Taza was leaning heavily on her, his usual grace lost to dizziness. Chaitin jumped up as they entered. What happened? Ice by the well. He hit his head. Clara was already guiding Taza to a chair, her hands moving to examine the wound. Get me clean water and the whiskey. She worked with the same calm efficiency she'd shown with Chaitin's injury. But inside, her heart was racing. The gash wasn't deep, but head wounds bled freely and could be deceptive. Look at me, she instructed, tilting his face up to check his eyes. They were slightly unfocused but reactive. "Follow my finger." As she moved her fingers slowly back and forth, she became intensely aware of how close they were, her hands cradling his face. His eyes locked on hers even as they tracked her movement. "Your hands are shaking," he observed quietly. "Head wounds worry me," she said, not admitting that it was more than medical concern making her tremble. She cleaned the wound carefully, her touch gentle as she worked. Taza sat perfectly still, but she could feel the tension in him, see the way his hands gripped the chair arms. "There," she said finally, tying off the bandage. "You'll have a headache, but I don't think it's serious." She started to step back, but his hand caught hers. "Clara," just her name, but the way he said it made her stop breathing. Chayton, with unusual tact, chose that moment to announce he was checking on the horses. Fog or no fog. Alone, they remained frozen in tableau, her standing between his knees, his hand holding hers, both knowing they stood at the edge of something that would change everything. "I should not," Taza said roughly. "You deserve better than what I can offer." "What if I don't want better?" Clara heard herself say. "What if I just want what's real?" He stood slowly, her hand still caught in his, and they were so close she could feel the warmth radiating from him, could see the battle playing out in his dark eyes. "You don't know what you're asking," he said. "I'm not asking for anything," Clara replied, her voice steadier than her heart. "I'm just telling you that when you leave, and I know you will leave, I'll carry the memory of this winter for the rest of my days. And I'm grateful for it, for you, for all of it." Something broke in his expression then, control crumbling like ice in spring. His free hand rose to cup her cheek, thumb tracing the line of her cheekbone with infinite care. "You have undone me, Clara Whitmore," he whispered. The moment hung between them like morning mist, delicate and ready to dissolve at the slightest disturbance. Taza's hand remained on Clara's cheek, his touch so gentle it might have been imagination, except for the warmth that spread from that single point of contact. She could hear her own heartbeat, loud as thunder in the quiet cabin. Then the door burst open, Chayton stumbling in with a gust of cold fog. "Can't see anything out there." He stopped short, taking in the scene before him. Taza stepped back, his hand falling away, leaving Clara's skin cold in its absence. The spell broke, but something fundamental had shifted, something that couldn't be taken back. "I'll make coffee," Clara said, her voice not quite steady, and busied herself at the stove. Chayton looked between them, understanding dawning on his face. For once, he didn't fill the silence with chatter, just moved to tend the fire with unusual focus. The rest of the day passed in careful politeness, each of them too aware of the others, moving through the familiar routines like actors who had forgotten their lines. Clara caught herself watching Taza when she thought he wasn't looking, noticed the way he seemed to always know where she was in the room without appearing to track her movements. That evening after supper, Chayton announced he was tired and retired early, too early, with such obvious intent that it might have been comical under different circumstances. His departure left Clara and Taza alone by the fire, the weight of unfinished moments pressing down on them. "He's not subtle," Clara said softly, a tempting lightness. "No, subtlety is not among his gifts." Taza stared into the flames. "He means well. He wants me to find happiness." "And what do you want?" He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. "I want many things I cannot have. I have learned to live with wanting." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. "That's no way to live." "It is the only way I know." He turned to look at her then, and the raw longing in his expression took her breath away. "Until now." She stood abruptly, needing distance, needing air. "I should check the chickens. Clara." He stood too, and suddenly the small cabin felt smaller still. "I would not hurt you for all the world. You know this?" "I know." She wrapped her arms around herself. "But we're going to hurt anyway, aren't we? When this ends." Yes, the simple honesty of it was somehow worse than denial would have been. "Then maybe—" She turned to face him fully, summoning courage she didn't know she possessed. Maybe we should at least have something worth the pain. He crossed to her in 2 strides, his hands framing her face, thumbs brushing away tears she hadn't realized were falling. "You humble me?" he whispered. "Your courage, your strength." "I'm not strong," Clara protested. "I'm terrified. Fear and courage are brothers. One cannot exist without the other." She reached up, her fingers tentatively touching the bandage on his forehead. "Does it hurt?" "Nothing hurts when you touch me," he said roughly. That is the problem. Their faces were so close she could feel his breath on her skin. Time seemed to slow, the moment stretching like taffy. Then, as if drawn by invisible threads, they moved together. The kiss was careful at first, a question asked and answered in the meeting of lips. Clara's hands found their way to his chest, feeling his heart race to match hers. His arms came around her, pulling her closer, and careful became something else entirely. Desperate, necessary, a confession without words. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Clara felt as though the world had shifted on its axis. Everything looked the same. Her worn furniture, her faded curtains, her simple home. But nothing would ever be quite as it was before. "I should go," Taza said, though he made no move to release her. "Yes," Clara agreed, but her hands fisted in his shirt. Holding on, they stood there, foreheads touching, breathing the same air, both knowing what should happen and unable to make it so. "Tomorrow," Taza finally said. "I will remember duty. Tomorrow I will remember all the reasons this cannot be. But tonight doesn't exist," Clara finished. "Tonight is just a dream." He kissed her again, deeper this time, and Clara let herself fall into it, into him, into this moment stolen from time. The next morning brought bright sunshine and melting snow. The warm spell would make travel possible again soon, a fact that hung unspoken over breakfast. Chayton kept the conversation light, but his eyes were watchful, protective of both his friend and the woman who had shown them such kindness. As Clara cleared the dishes, she felt Taza watching her. They hadn't spoken of the night before, hadn't acknowledged the line they'd crossed, but it lived in every careful non-touch, every avoided gaze, every word they didn't say. "I'll ride to town today," she announced. "We need supplies. The road will be muddy," Taza observed. "Dangerous. I've ridden it in worse." "We'll go with you," Chayton said firmly. "You've fed us for weeks. Least we can do is watch your back." Clara wanted to protest but recognized the wisdom in it. The trip to Desert Hollow would be treacherous with the snowmelt, and having help might mean the difference between inconvenience and disaster. They set out after noon, Clara on her steady mare, the men on their painted horses. The sun was almost warm, and the world sparkled with melting ice. It would have been beautiful if not for the dread building in Clara's stomach. Town meant people. People meant questions. Questions meant remembering exactly who she was and who they were and why this could never work. The road was indeed a mess, thick with mud and running with snowmelt. They picked their way carefully, Taza riding ahead to scout the worst spots. Chayton staying close to Clara. No one spoke much, the squelch of hooves in mud and the drip of melting snow filling the silence. They were a mile from town when they met the first riders, 3 men Clara recognized from the feed store. The men pulled up short, their faces hardening as they took in her companions. "Mrs. Whitmore," the leader, Jack Morrison, tipped his hat with exaggerated courtesy. "Didn't expect to see you traveling with company, Mr. Morrison." Clara kept her voice steady. "These men helped me through the storm. I'm showing them to town for supplies." Morrison's eyes narrowed. "That so? Being real helpful. Are they?" "Yes," Clara said firmly. "Very helpful." The men exchanged looks that made Clara's skin crawl. "You be careful, ma'am. Never know what kind of help folks might be offering." They rode on, but Clara could feel their eyes following them. Beside her, she sensed Taza's tension, saw Chayton's hand drift toward his knife. "It's fine. she said quietly. "They're just—" "We know what they are." Taza cut her off, his voice flat. Town was worse. Work stopped as they rode down the main street. Women pulled children closer. Men stepped out of buildings to stare. Clara had never felt so visible, so judged. She kept her chin high, her eyes forward, but inside she wanted to turn and flee back to the safety of her cabin. At the general store, Mr. Hendricks served her with cold efficiency, his eyes constantly flicking to where Taza and Chayton waited with the horses. His wife wouldn't even look at Clara, turning her back with theatrical disgust. "Heard you had visitors out your way," Hendricks said as he tallied her purchases. "Folks are talking." "Folks always talk," Clara replied evenly. "They're saying maybe you've been alone too long. Maybe you're not thinking clear." Clara's temper flared. "My thinking is fine, Mr. Hendricks, as is my judgment about who deserves hospitality and who doesn't." She paid and left, her purchases lighter than usual. Hendricks had clearly been less than generous with weights. Outside, she found a small crowd gathered around Taza and Chayton. Sheriff Watson stood at the front, his hand resting on his pistol. "Just making sure there's no trouble," Watson was saying. "No trouble," Taza replied, his voice dangerously quiet. "We travel in peace. See that you keep traveling then? This isn't a friendly place for your kind." Clara pushed through the crowd. "Sheriff Watson, these men are with me." Watson turned his cold eyes on her. "That's what concerns me, Mrs. Whitmore. A woman alone can make poor choices. Maybe you need help seeing clearly." "My vision is perfectly clear," Clara snapped. "Clear enough to see harassment when it's happening. These men have broken no laws." "Not yet," someone muttered from the crowd. The ride back was silent and tense. Clara could feel anger radiating from Taza, saw the way Chayton kept checking behind them. The ugly faces of the townspeople seemed to follow them, their whispered judgments echoing in her ears. When they finally reached the cabin, Clara felt like she could breathe again. But the damage was done. The outside world had intruded on their small peace, reminding them all of exactly why this was impossible. "I'm sorry," Clara said as they unloaded the supplies. "They had no right." "They had every right," Taza interrupted. "This is their place. We are the intruders." "You're not intruders. You're—" She stopped, not sure how to finish. What were they? Guests? Friends? Something more that had no safe name? That night, dinner was a quiet affair. The easy camaraderie of recent days had been poisoned by the town's reaction. Clara picked at her food, acutely aware of Taza's withdrawal, the way he'd rebuilt walls she thought were coming down. "We should leave soon," Taza said suddenly. "The weather is turning. The passes will be clear." Clara's fork clattered to her plate. "Because of today?" "Because it is time." He wouldn't look at her. "We have imposed too long." "Stop saying that," Clara said sharply. "You haven't imposed. You've—" Her voice broke. "You've made this place feel alive again." Chayton looked between them with a sad understanding. "Perhaps I will check the horses," he said, leaving them alone. The silence stretched until Clara couldn't bear it. "So, you're just going to leave? Because some ignorant people in town said ugly things. I'm going to leave because staying will destroy you." Taza finally met her eyes, and the pain there matched her own. "Today was just the beginning. It will get worse. They will make your life a misery." "And for what? For something that cannot last?" Clara stood abruptly, anger flooding through her. "Don't you dare make this choice for me. Don't you dare decide what I can or cannot handle." He stood too, matching her fire. "You think I want this? You think it doesn't tear at me to know I must go? Then don't go." The words ripped from her throat. "Stay. Fight. Choose something different than duty and sacrifice for once in your life. And watch you lose everything. Your home, your reputation, perhaps your life. No." His voice was raw. "I have caused enough destruction. I will not add you to the list." They stood facing each other, both breathing hard, the air between them electric with anguish and desperate desire. "I love you," Clara said, the words falling like stones into still water. "I didn't mean to. I didn't want to. But I do. And if you leave now—" Like this. I'll never forgive you for making that choice alone. The words hung in the air between them. Clara's confession raw and desperate. Taza stood frozen, his face a mask of anguish, hands clenched at his sides as if physically restraining himself from reaching for her. Clara! Her name was barely a whisper on his lips. No, she said, tears flowing freely now. Don't say my name like it's goodbye. Not yet. He moved then, crossing to her in one fluid motion, his hands cupping her face as he captured her mouth in a kiss that was fierce and desperate and full of everything they couldn't say. Clara melted against him, her hands fisting in his shirt, holding on as if she could keep him there by sheer force of will. When they broke apart, both breathing raggedly, Taza rested his forehead against hers. You have torn my world apart, he said roughly. Everything I thought I knew, everything I thought I had accepted about my life, you changed it all. Then stay, Clara whispered. Please. His thumbs brushed away her tears even as his own eyes glistened. I would give anything, but I cannot watch them destroy you. And they will. Clara, what you saw today was nothing. It will become worse. Rocks through windows, barn fires. Perhaps worse. I have seen what hatred does. I will not bring it to your door. Clara pulled back to look at him fully. And what about what I've seen? 7 years of emptiness, 7 years of going through the motions of living without actually being alive? You think I care about rocks and whispers when I found this? You should care, Taza said fiercely. This life, this land, you fought to keep it? Would you throw it away for a few stolen moments? They're not stolen if I give them freely, Clara countered. And this land means nothing if I'm alone on it forever. A sound from outside made them both tense. Chayton entered, his face grave. Riders, he said simply, coming fast. Through the window, Clara could see torches in the darkness. Her blood ran cold. 5, maybe 6 riders, and she recognized the shape of Jack Morrison in the lead. Get your rifle, Taza commanded, already moving to gather their weapons. The warrior she'd glimpsed beneath his careful control was suddenly fully present, deadly and focused. Clara grabbed the Winchester, checking it was loaded. Her hands were steady now, fear replaced by anger. How dare they come to her home like this? The riders stopped just outside her fence line. Mrs. Whitmore, Morrison called. We're here to help you, ma'am. Come on out and we'll escort you to safety. I'm perfectly safe. Mr. Morrison. Clara called back through the door. You can go home. Now, don't be difficult. We know them savages got you confused. Natural for a woman alone to be taken in. Just come on out and we'll handle the rest. The only thing confusing me is why you think you have any say in who I allow on my property. Clara retorted. There was murmuring among the men. Then Morrison's voice hardened. One way or another, those Apache are leaving tonight. You can make it easy, or you can make it hard. Taza touched her shoulder. Let us go, he said quietly. It's better. No, Clara's voice was steel. This is my land, my choice. They have no right. She opened the door and stepped onto the porch, rifle visible but not raised. Gentlemen, you're trespassing. I'll ask you once to leave. Morrison laughed. An ugly sound. Little woman's gotten above herself. Boys, maybe we need to remind her of her place. One of the riders started forward. Clara raised the rifle. One more step and I'll drop you where you stand. You wouldn't dare. The shot cracked through the night air, Clara's bullet kicking up dirt inches from the horse's hooves. The animal reared, nearly throwing its rider. The next one won't miss, Clara said calmly. Now get off my land. For a moment, the night balanced on a knife's edge. Then Morrison spat in the dirt. This ain't over. You've chosen your side, woman. Remember that when the consequences come calling. They wheeled and rode away. But Clara knew they'd be back. Probably with more men, certainly with more anger. She lowered the rifle with shaking hands. That was foolish, Taza said, but there was something like awe in his voice. That was necessary. Clara corrected. She turned to face both men. I won't be driven from my home. Not by them, not by fear, not by anyone's idea of what's proper or safe. Chayton whistled low. You have the heart of a warrior. Mrs. Clara. I have the heart of a woman who's tired of being told what she can and cannot do. Clara said. She looked at Taza. But I can't fight them alone. And if you leave now, that's what I'll be. Alone. The three of them stood in her small cabin, the weight of the moment heavy around them. Finally, Taza spoke. If we stay, it will mean war. Maybe not with guns, but war all the same. Every day will be a battle. Then we'll fight it together, Clara said simply. Taza studied her face for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. Together, he agreed. The word was a promise, a commitment that changed everything. Chayton whooped and clapped Taza on the shoulder. But Taza's eyes never left Clara's face, and she saw in them the same mixture of joy and terror that she felt. Later, with the cabin secured and watches set, Clara found herself alone with Taza again. Chayton had taken first watch, giving them privacy with his usual perceptiveness. You should not have done that, Taza said softly, shooting at them, defying them. You've made yourself a target. I've been a target since the day I refused to sell this place and moved to town like a proper widow. Clara replied. At least now I'm a target for something that matters. He crossed to her, his hands settling on her shoulders. You matter. Your safety matters. Then stay and help me protect it. Clara said, Stop trying to protect me by leaving. That's not protection. That's abandonment dressed up as nobility. Taza's jaw tightened. You think I want to leave? You think it doesn't tear at my soul to imagine riding away, never seeing your face again, never hearing your laugh? Then don't, Clara said simply. Choose to stay. Choose to fight. Choose us. Us, he repeated, the word seeming to surprise him. Is that what we are? Clara reached up to touch his face, feeling the tension in his jaw. We could be, if you're brave enough. You question my bravery? There was almost amusement in his voice now. I question your willingness to be brave about this. Clara said, Fighting, facing danger. That's one kind of courage. But this? Choosing love when the whole world says no. That's a different kind altogether. Taza turned his face into her palm, pressing a kiss there that sent fire through her veins. You make me want to be brave in ways I never imagined, he admitted. Then be brave. Clara whispered, Be brave with me. He drew her closer, his arms encircling her, and Clara felt safe despite the danger lurking beyond her walls. This was madness, she knew. Everything logical said she should send them away. Go back to her quiet, empty life, avoid the storm that was surely coming. But logic had kept her merely existing for 7 years. This, Taza's arms around her, his heartbeat under her ear, the promise of something more than survival. This was living. I need to know, she said against his chest. I need to know this is real for you too, that it's not just proximity or gratitude or... Taza pulled back enough to look at her, his dark eyes intense. You think I give my heart lightly? You think I would risk your life for anything less than... He stopped, struggling with words. Then what? Clara prompted softly. Then everything. He finished roughly. You are everything. Clara, from the moment you opened your door that night, something in me recognized something in you. I fought it, denied it, told myself it was impossible. But the heart doesn't listen to reason. Clara felt tears slip down her cheeks again, but these were different, tears of relief, of joy, of released tension. I love you, she said again, the words easier this time. I know it's insane and impossible and dangerous, but I love you, and I love you, Taza replied, the words seeming to surprise him even as he said them. May the spirits help us both. This time when he kissed her, it was different, slower, deeper, a claiming and a promise all at once. Clara lost herself in it, in him, in this moment stolen from a hostile world. His hands tangled in her hair, loosening it from its pins until it fell around her shoulders. She pressed closer, feeling the solid warmth of him, the strength that made her feel protected even as her own strength protected him in return. When Chaitin's whistle warned of his approach, they broke apart reluctantly. Clara quickly tried to pin her hair back up. Her cheeks flushed, while Taza moved to stoke the fire with studied casualness. Chaitin entered with a knowing grin. "All quiet out there, too quiet maybe. They'll be back. Let them come," Clara said with more confidence than she felt. "This is my home, our home, for as long as you'll stay. Then they'll be facing all of us." Chaitin declared, "I may joke too much, but I know how to fight when it matters. And this," he gestured between Taza and Clara, "this matters." The night passed without incident, but dawn brought new challenges. Through the window, they could see riders on the ridge, not approaching, just watching. The message was clear. Clara was under surveillance. Her every move noted. "They're trying to scare you," Taza observed, his voice tight with controlled anger. "They're succeeding," Clara admitted, then squared her shoulders. "But fear won't drive me away. I've got spring planting to prepare for, animals to tend, a life to live. They can watch all they want." She went about her morning chores with determined normalcy, though she could feel eyes on her constantly. Taza and Chaitin worked alongside her, their presence both comforting and concerning. How long could they maintain this defiance? How long before watching turned to action? The answer came sooner than expected. As Clara collected eggs, she found a note tucked under one hen. "Send them away or we will. Last warning." She crumpled the paper with shaking hands. When she returned to the cabin, both men could read the distress on her face. "What happened?" Taza demanded, wordlessly. She handed him the note. His face darkened as he read it, passing it to Chaitin. "Cowards," Chaitin spat, "sneaking around in the dark, threatening women." "They're escalating," Taza said quietly. "This is what I feared, what I wanted to spare you." Clara took the note back, walked to the fireplace, and dropped it into the flames. "My answer remains the same," she said, watching it burn. "This is my home. You are my guests for as long as you choose. Anyone who has a problem with that can face me directly." She turned to find both men watching her with expressions of mingled admiration and concern. "You're sure?" Taza asked one more time. "Once this path is chosen—" "The path was chosen the night I opened my door," Clara said firmly. "Everything else is just walking it." The days that followed were tense, marked by watching riders on the ridge and the constant awareness of hostile eyes. But inside the cabin, a different story unfolded. The decision to stand together had shifted something fundamental between the three of them. They moved now like a unit, each anticipating the other's needs, creating a rhythm of shared purpose. Clara woke before dawn to find Taza already up, standing watch by the window. The early morning light cast his profile in sharp relief, and she allowed herself a moment to simply look at him, to marvel at how this man had become so essential to her world in such a short time. "You should be sleeping," he said without turning, somehow sensing her awakeness. "So should you." She rose and joined him, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders against the pre-dawn chill. "Old habits," he said simply. "The hours before dawn. That's when attacks come." Clara studied his face, seeing the weight of years of vigilance etched there. "How long have you been watching for attacks, Taza?" "Since I was 12 summers." His voice was matter-of-fact, but Clara heard the layers beneath. "My father died when I was young. I became the watcher for my mother, my sister, the ones you lost." He nodded slowly. "Soldiers came while I was hunting. I returned to ashes in silence." His jaw tightened. For many years after, all I could see was war. All I could feel was the need for vengeance. Clara slipped her hand into his, offering silent comfort. "What changed?" "Time, exhaustion, Chaitin." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "He reminded me that living only for death is no life at all, but I had forgotten how to live for anything else. Until, he turned to face her fully, his free hand rising to touch her cheek, until a brave woman opened her door on a winter night and reminded me that kindness still exists in this world. The moment was broken by movement outside. 3 riders approaching openly down the road. Clara recognized Sheriff Watson's distinctive gray hat. "Wake Chayton," Taza said, his warrior mask sliding back into place. "But quietly. Let's not show them we're alarmed." By the time Watson and his deputies reached the gate, all 3 were on the porch. Clara in the middle, the men flanking her casually but ready. "Morning, Sheriff," Clara called out pleasantly. "You're out early." Watson dismounted, his deputies staying on their horses. "Mrs. Whitmore, gentlemen," his tone was cold. "I'm here on official business." "Oh? And what business would that be?" "Had a complaint that you threatened Jack Morrison and his men with a firearm." Clara's eyebrows rose. "I defended my property against trespassers who came in the night with torches. Last I checked, that was my right. Your right when dealing with actual threats, maybe, but these men were concerned citizens trying to help a woman who might be under duress." "Do I look under duress to you, Sheriff?" Clara asked dryly. Watson's eyes flicked to Taza and Chayton. Hard to say what a person under influence might look like. "Choose your words carefully, Sheriff," Taza said quietly, but there was danger in his tone. Watson's hand drifted to his gun. "Is that a threat?" "It's advice." Chayton interjected with a disarming smile. "We're all peaceful here, just sharing breakfast and conversation. Very civilized." "Civilized?" Watson repeated skeptically. "That what you call it?" He looked back at Clara. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to come to town. There's been talk of filing charges." "Charges?" Clara's voice sharpened. "For defending my own property?" "For reckless endangerment. For harboring—" He paused, his lip curling. "Undesirable elements. For disturbing the peace of the community." Clara felt rage rise in her chest. "The only peace being disturbed is mine. And I'll remind you, Sheriff Watson, that these men have broken no laws. They're guests on private property. That situation concerns folks. A white woman alone with 2 Apache bucks." The crude term was as far as he got. Taza moved, fast as lightning. And suddenly Watson was on his knees in the dirt. Taza's hand twisted in his shirt collar. The deputies went for their guns but froze as Chayton's knife appeared in his hand. "You will speak of her with respect," Taza said, his voice deadly calm. "Or you will not speak at all." "Taza," Clara said softly, "let him up." For a moment, she thought he might not listen. Saw the warrior who had survived countless battles in the controlled violence of his stance. Then he released Watson, stepping back with fluid grace. Watson scrambled to his feet, face red with humiliation and fury. "You just assaulted a lawman. I could arrest you." "You could try," Chayton said cheerfully, though his knife remained visible. "Stop this." Clara stepped forward, placing herself between the men. "Sheriff, you came here to intimidate me, and it's not working. I know my rights. Unless you have a warrant, get off my property. If the town wants to file charges, they know where to find me, but I won't be driven from my home by threats and insinuations." Watson straightened his shirt, hatred burning in his eyes. "You're making a mistake, Mrs. Whitmore. These savages will turn on you. It's in their nature. And when they do, don't expect help from decent folks. I've seen more decency from these men in a few weeks than I've seen from the decent folks of Desert Hollow in 7 years." Clara shot back. "Now leave." Watson mounted his horse, but turned back for a final word. "This isn't over, not by a long shot." After they rode away, Clara found herself shaking. Taza's arms came around her from behind, solid and comforting. "You should not have to face this," he murmured against her hair. "Neither should you," she replied, turning in his embrace. "But here we are." "Here we are," he agreed, and kissed her forehead tenderly. That afternoon brought an unexpected ally. Martha Brennan, the minister's wife and one of the few women who had been kind to Clara over the years, arrived in her buggy. Clara met her at the gate, wary but hopeful. "Martha, this is unexpected." Martha looked nervous but determined. "May I come in? Clara, I'd like to speak with you." Once inside, Martha's eyes went immediately to Taza and Chayton, who stood respectfully as she entered. Clara made introductions, noting how Martha's initial fear gave way to curiosity as Chayton offered her his chair with courtly grace. "I'll be direct," Martha said once seated. "The town is in an uproar. They're planning something, though Henry, my husband, won't tell me what. But Clara, I remember when you first came here with Thomas. You were so full of life and hope. These past years, I've watched that light dim, and now—" "Now?" Clara prompted. Martha's eyes went to Taza, then back to Clara. "Now I see it again, that light, and I think anyone who brings light back to a friend's eyes can't be the monster they're painting him as." Clara felt tears threaten. "Martha, thank you." "Don't thank me yet," Martha said grimly. "I came to warn you. Tomorrow night, there's a town meeting. They mean to vote on whether to take action about the situation. Henry's trying to be a voice of reason, but hatred speaks louder than reason." Taza finished. Martha looked at him with surprise. "Yes, exactly that." She stood to leave, then impulsively reached out to clasp Clara's hands. "Be careful, and be happy. Life's too short and too hard to turn away from happiness when it finds you." After she left, the three of them sat in heavy silence. Finally, Chayton spoke. "We could leave tonight, lead them away from here." "No," Clara said firmly. "Running now means running forever. This is where we make our stand." That night, as they prepared defenses they hoped not to need, Clara found herself working alongside Taza in the barn, securing the animals in case of trouble. The lamplight cast dancing shadows as they worked, and Clara was intensely aware of his every movement. "Tell me about after," she said suddenly. "After? After this is resolved, after we've faced whatever comes, tell me what you see." Taza paused in his work, considering. "I see mornings waking beside you. I see teaching you to read the sky for weather, to track deer, to find medicine plants in the hills. I see Chayton complaining about our cooking while he eats 3 helpings. I see—" He stopped, seemingly surprised by his own words. Clara moved closer, her hand finding his. "Tell me," she urged softly. "I see children," he said roughly, "running through the grass, brown skin and green eyes, caught between 2 worlds but loved enough to bridge them." Clara's breath caught. "Children!" He pulled her close suddenly, almost desperately. "Is that not what you want? Have I presumed?" She silenced him with a kiss, pouring all her answer into the contact. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, she smiled through her tears. "I'm 32 years old. I thought that chance had passed me by." "Nothing has passed you by," Taza said fiercely. "You have more life in you than anyone I've known. You would be. You are everything." They came together again, the kiss deeper, more urgent. Clara's hands found their way into his hair, loosening it from its tie. His hands spanned her waist, pulling her against him until she could feel his heart racing to match hers. "Clara!" He breathed against her mouth, her name a prayer and a plea. "I know," she whispered. "Not here, not like this, when we're safe, when we're sure." He rested his forehead against hers, both of them struggling for control. "You are worth waiting for, worth fighting for, worth everything." The barn door creaked, and they stepped apart as Chayton entered. He took one look at them and grinned. "The house is secure. I'll take first watch. You two should rest." The knowing look he gave them made Clara blush, but there was only warm approval in his expression. Back in the house, Clara made up beds as usual, the men by the fire, herself in her room. But sleep eluded her. Every creak of the house made her tense, waiting for attack. Finally, she gave up and returned to the main room. Taza sat by the banked fire, carving something by feel in the darkness. He looked up as she entered, and without a word, opened his arms. Clara went to him, curling against his chest, feeling truly safe for the first time all day. "What are you making?" she asked, touching the piece of wood in his hands. "A toy horse," he said quietly. "For the child I saw in my vision. The one with your smile." Clara's heart clenched with love so fierce it almost hurt. "I want that future, Taza. All of it. The mornings, the lessons, the children, everything. Then we will fight for it," he promised. "Tomorrow and all the days after." They sat together through the long night, not speaking much, just holding each other and holding on to hope. When dawn broke clear and cold, it felt like a promise that no matter what darkness men brought to their door, light would always return. Chayton found them there, still entwined, and shook his head with fond exasperation. "You two will be the death of me. How am I supposed to keep watch when I'm wiping away tears at your romance?" But his joking couldn't mask the concern in his eyes. They all knew that today would bring a reckoning. The town meeting tonight would decide whether they faced official action or mob justice. Either way, their small circle of peace was about to be tested by the storm of the outside world's hatred and fear. "Whatever comes," Clara said, looking at both men who had become her world, "we face it together." "Together," they echoed. And in that word was a vow stronger than any ceremony could make. The day passed with excruciating slowness. Each hour waited with the knowledge of what was coming. By late afternoon, riders began passing on the road to town, more than usual for a simple meeting. Clara watched from the window as families she'd known for years rode by without looking toward her cabin, their faces set in grim determination. "They mean to decide our fate without us present," Taza observed, standing beside her. "Let them," Clara said with more bravado than she felt. "Their decisions don't change who we are or what we've chosen." As dusk fell, an unexpected visitor arrived. Henry Brennan, the minister, looking haggard and worried. Clara invited him in, noting how his eyes kept returning to Taza and Chayton with a mixture of curiosity and caution. "I've come from the meeting," he said without preamble. "Or, rather, I left early. I couldn't stomach anymore." "What are they planning?" Clara asked, though her heart already knew. "Morrison has them worked into a frenzy. Talk of protecting white womanhood, of savage threats, of making an example." Henry rubbed his face tiredly. "I tried to speak reason, reminded them of Christ's teachings about strangers and mercy. They shouted me down." "We appreciate the warning," Taza said quietly. Henry looked at him directly for the first time. "You know, in all the fury and fear-mongering, no one mentioned anything you've actually done wrong. Just your existence here seems to be crime enough." "That's often the way," Chayton said with bitter humor. "We breathe wrong, and it's a threat." "When will they come?" Clara asked. "Tonight, most likely. Morrison's gathering men at his ranch. They mean to force you out. All of you." Henry stood to leave, then paused. "There's something else. Sam Wilkins spoke up for you. Clara said you'd been nothing but a good neighbor all these years. Morrison struck him down, and no one lifted a finger to help. That's when I knew words were useless and left." After Henry departed, they made their preparations in earnest. Weapons were checked, water barrels filled in case of fire, the horses saddled and ready. As full darkness fell, Clara found herself standing in her bedroom, looking at the bed she'd shared with Thomas, the quilt her mother had made, the simple furnishings that held 7 years of solitary life. Taza appeared in the doorway. "What are you thinking?" "I'm wondering if I'll see this room again," she said honestly. "If any of us will." He crossed to her, turning her to face him. "Do you regret?" "No," she cut him off firmly. "Whatever happens, these weeks with you have been worth everything. I want more time, more mornings, more everything. As do I." He cupped her face tenderly. "Clara, if something happens—" "Don't," she whispered. "Don't say goodbye. Not yet." He kissed her instead, pouring all his unspoken words into the contact. Clara clung to him, memorizing the feeling, the taste, the solid warmth of him against her. "I need you to know," he said against her lips. "My whole life, I've carried anger like a stone in my chest. You took that stone away. You gave me peace. Whatever comes, you gave me that." Chayton's sharp whistle interrupted them. "They're coming!" Through the window, they could see torches bobbing through the darkness, many more than before. Clara counted at least 15 men, maybe 20. Her heart sank. They couldn't fight those numbers. "The canyon," Taza said urgently. "There's a box canyon 2 miles north where we hunted, defensible, with water. We go now." Clara wanted to protest, to make her stand here, but she saw the tactical wisdom. Here they'd be surrounded. There, they might have a chance. They moved quickly, Clara grabbing only essentials: ammunition, food, her medical supplies. As she passed through the main room, her eyes fell on her loom, the half-finished cloth still threaded. "Leave it," Taza urged gently. "We'll come back." But would they? Clara didn't voice the question as they slipped out the back, leading the horses quietly into the darkness. Behind them, they could hear angry voices discovering the empty cabin. The ride to the canyon was treacherous in the dark, following deer paths and creek beds. Clara trusted Taza's navigation, focusing on staying in the saddle as branches caught at her clothes and rocks threatened to lame the horses. Chayton brought up the rear, watching for pursuit. They'd just entered the canyon when they heard the glow behind them. Clara turned in her saddle to see orange light painting the sky where her cabin stood. "No," she breathed, starting to turn back. Taza caught her reins. "It's done. I'm sorry." Clara watched her home burn. 7 years of struggle and survival turning to ash because she dared to love the wrong man. Rage burned in her chest, hot as the flames. "They'll pay for this," she said quietly, and something in her tone made both men look at her sharply. They made camp deep in the canyon, a defensive position with rock walls on 3 sides and a narrow entrance that could be watched. As Clara tended the horses with mechanical efficiency, Taza built a small, smokeless fire while Chayton scouted their perimeter. "I should have left," Taza said suddenly. "That first morning, I should have taken Chayton and gone." Clara whirled on him. "Don't you dare! Don't you dare make their hatred your fault! You didn't burn my home! They did! You didn't bring violence here! They did! All you brought was kindness and help and—" Her voice broke. "And love." He caught her as she stumbled, holding her while the shock and loss finally hit. She sobbed against his chest, grieving not just the cabin but what it represented. Thomas's dreams, her independence, the life she'd built alone. "I have nothing now," she whispered. "They took everything." "No." Taza tilted her face up. "You have us. You have my heart, my life, my future. All yours, if you'll take them. And mine," Chayton added, returning from his scouting. "My loyalty, my friendship, my terrible jokes to lighten dark moments. We are your family now. Clara, if you'll have us." Clara looked between them, these 2 men who'd given up safety and freedom for her, and felt something shift inside her chest. The cabin was gone, but home. Home was right here. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, to all of it." They spent the night taking turns on watch, each alert for sounds of pursuit, but the mob seemed content with burning her out, at least for now. As dawn broke over the canyon walls, painting the rocks in shades of gold and red, Clara found herself planning. "We can't stay here forever," she said as they shared a sparse breakfast. "And I won't run. That land is mine. Legally, they had no right." "Legal doesn't matter much when men take law into their own hands," Chayton pointed out. "Then we make it matter." Clara's jaw set stubbornly. "There are good people in Desert Hollow. Martha Brennan, Sam Wilkins, others who stay quiet out of fear. If we can reach them, make them see." "It's dangerous," Taza warned. "Morrison and his men won't stop now. They've tasted blood. Then we give them something else to taste." Clara said fiercely, "Justice. I'll wire the territorial governor, the federal marshal, someone who stands above small-town hatred." Taza studied her with something like wonder. You would fight the whole town. I'd fight the whole world. Clara replied, For this, for us, for the right to choose who I love. They spent the morning planning. Chayton would ride to the next town to send telegrams, being less recognizable. Taza and Clara would remain hidden, moving camp if necessary. It wasn't much of a plan, but it was better than running or dying. As Chayton prepared to leave, he pulled Clara aside. Take care of him, he said quietly. He's waited his whole life for someone to see past the warrior to the man. You do that. I'll protect him with my life. Clara promised. Chayton grinned. I think he'd say the same about you. You're well matched, both too stubborn to know when to quit. After he rode out, Clara and Taza were truly alone for the first time since this ordeal began. The canyon was peaceful, birds calling in the morning light, a small stream providing gentle music. It's beautiful here, Clara observed, trying to find something positive. You make it beautiful, Taza said, moving to stand behind her, his arms encircling her waist. You could make a prison cell beautiful just by being in it. Clara leaned back against him, allowing herself this moment of peace. What if Chayton can't get help? What if no one cares about one widow and 2 Apache men? Then we find another way. Head south, maybe, into Mexico, or north to the territories. Somewhere we can start fresh. Together? Always together. If you'll have me. I know I'm not what you dreamed of when you were young. Not the life you planned. Clara turned in his arms to face him. Thomas was what I planned. Safe, predictable, approved by everyone. And you know what? It was good, but it was never... She searched for words. It never made me feel like my whole body was on fire just from a look. It never made me willing to fight the world just to wake up beside someone. Is that what I make you feel? His voice was rough with emotion. That and more. Clara admitted, You make me feel alive. Taza, truly alive. Not just existing, not just surviving, but living with every breath. He kissed her then, deep and passionate, and Clara let herself get lost in it. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, she saw her own desire reflected in his dark eyes. When this is over, he said, voice strained with control. When we're safe and free, I want to marry you properly. However your people do it, or mine, or both, I want the world to know you're mine and I'm yours. Yes, Clara breathed. Yes, to all of it. They spent the day in the canyon, keeping watch but also talking, sharing stories of their childhoods, their dreams, their fears. Clara learned about Taza's first horse, the way his mother sang while grinding corn, the games he played with his sister. She told him about learning to read from her mother's Bible, about the first time she saw Thomas and thought he looked like a storybook prince, about the dreams that had brought them west. As afternoon shadows lengthened, they heard horses approaching. Taza immediately moved to defensive position, but relaxed when Chayton's distinctive whistle echoed off the canyon walls. He wasn't alone. Behind him rode a man in a federal marshal's badge, and Clara's heart leaped with hope. This is Marshal Coleman, Chayton announced, grinning broadly. He was already heading this way. Seems Morrison's been wanted for cattle rustling 2 counties over. The marshal, a weathered man with keen eyes, dismounted and approached. Ma'am, I understand you've had some trouble with vigilantes. They burned my home, Clara said bluntly. Because I gave shelter to these men during the storm. No other reason. Coleman nodded slowly. I've seen it before. Fear makes men do terrible things, but burning property, making threats, that's not how law works. I'll be having words with Morrison and his crew. And us? Taza asked carefully. What happens to us? Coleman looked him over. Far as I can tell, you've broken no laws. Man's got a right to accept hospitality. Woman's got a right to offer it. Anything else is between folks and their own consciences. For the first time in days, Clara felt real hope. Maybe they could win this. Maybe there was a future after all. As they prepared to ride back toward what remained of Clara's homestead, Marshal Coleman beside them as protection. Clara looked at Taza and Chayton, her chosen family, her unexpected loves. They'd taken everything from her. Her home, her peace, her place in the community. But they'd also given her something precious, the knowledge that she could survive anything with the right people beside her. And these were definitely the right people. "Ready?" Taza asked, reading the determination in her face. "Ready." Clara confirmed. "Let's go home." Even if home was ashes and memory, it was still hers, and she'd rebuild it from the ground up if necessary, with these two men beside her, creating something new and strong from the ruins of the old. The smoking ruins of Clara's cabin stood like a black scar against the afternoon sky. She sat straight in her saddle as they approached, refusing to let the devastation break her. Marshal Coleman rode beside her, his face grim as he surveyed the damage. "This goes beyond vigilante justice," he said quietly. "This is destruction of property, attempted murder. They could have killed you all if you'd been inside." "I believe that was their intention," Clara replied evenly, though her heart ached at seeing her home reduced to charred timber and ash. They dismounted near what had been her front porch. The stone chimney still stood, defiant among the ruins. Clara walked through the debris, her boots crunching on broken glass and burned wood. In what had been her bedroom, she found the metal frame of her mother's mirror, the glass cracked but somehow not shattered. "We'll rebuild," Taza said softly beside her. "Every board, every nail, better than before." She turned to him with tears in her eyes. "With what? Everything I had was in there." "With this," Marshal Coleman interrupted, pulling out a leather pouch. "Bounty money for information leading to Morrison's arrest. Seems you're not his first victim. Mrs. Whitmore, just the first brave enough to stand up to him." Before Clara could respond, the sound of approaching horses made them all tense. But it was Martha Brennan's buggy that appeared, followed by several other wagons. Clara recognized Sam Wilkins, his face still bruised from Morrison's fist, and the Hartley family, and old Mr. Johansson from the feed store. "Clara!" Martha jumped down from her buggy and ran to embrace her friend. "Thank God you're safe. When we saw the fire, we feared the worst." "What are you all doing here?" Clara asked, overwhelmed. Sam Wilkins stepped forward. "Coming to our senses, finally. Morrison's in custody along with 6 others. When the marshal started asking questions, plenty of folks remembered grievances, stolen cattle, threatened families, burned fences." "You weren't the first, Clara, just the bravest." Old Mr. Johansson cleared his throat. "We brought supplies, lumber, nails, canvas for temporary shelter. It ain't much, but it's a start." Clara felt tears flowing freely now. "I don't understand. Yesterday the whole town wanted us gone." "Not the whole town," Martha said firmly. "Just the loudest voices. The rest of us were cowards, staying silent. But seeing what they did, seeing how far hatred could go, we're done being quiet." As the sun began to set, the small group worked together to clear debris and set up a temporary camp. Clara watched in amazement as townspeople who had shunned her worked alongside Taza and Chayton, the artificial barriers beginning to crumble. That night, they gathered around a campfire built near the surviving chimney. The Hartleys had brought stew, Martha had cookies, and somehow it became an impromptu celebration of survival and new beginnings. "I owe you an apology," Sam Wilkins said to Taza. "I listened to Morrison's poison. Let fear guide me. You've shown more honor than most men I know, staying to protect Clara when you could have run." Taza accepted the offered handshake gravely. "A man protects what he loves. It requires no special honor." "Speaking of which," Marshal Coleman said, "I'll be needing statements from all of you about Morrison's activities. But I suspect once that's done, you folks can get on with your lives without further interference from the law." As the evening wore on, people gradually departed, promising to return tomorrow to help with rebuilding. Finally, only Clara, Taza, and Chayton remained by the dying fire. "I can't believe they came," Clara said softly. "After everything, you showed them courage." Chayton said, "Sometimes that's all people need to find their own." They settled for the night under the stars, the canvas providing basic shelter. Clara lay between the two men who had become her world, feeling safer under the open sky with them than she'd ever felt behind walls alone. In the deep of night, she woke to find Taza sitting up, keeping watch as always. She moved to sit beside him, leaning into his warmth. "Can't sleep?" she asked. "Too much to think about. Tomorrow, the work begins. Not just rebuilding walls, but rebuilding trust, understanding. It won't be easy. Nothing worth doing ever is," Clara said. "But we have something now we didn't before. Allies, people willing to stand with us. And each other," Taza added, pulling her closer. "That, most of all." The next morning brought a stream of helpers. By noon, the clearing was bustling with activity. Men cut lumber and raised frames, while women organized supplies and cooked for the workers. Clara found herself directing the construction, her mind already envisioning the improvements they'd make. "Bigger windows," she told Taza. "More light. And a room here, off the main house." "What for?" he asked, though his smile suggested he knew. "For children," she said boldly, not caring who heard. "The ones with brown skin and green eyes you saw in your vision." Several workers paused, and Clara braced for judgment, but Martha Brennan just smiled. About time this place heard the laughter of children again. As the sun peeked overhead, Reverend Brennan arrived and pulled Clara aside. "I've been thinking," he said carefully, "about ceremonies and commitments and the eyes of God versus the eyes of man." Clara's heart began to race. "Reverend? What I'm saying is, if two people wanted to make vows before God and their chosen witnesses, I might be persuaded that love blessed is better than love hidden, regardless of what some folks might think." Clara hugged the minister impulsively. "Thank you," she whispered. The work continued for days, the house rising from the ashes stronger than before. Taza and Chayton proved skilled builders, teaching Apache construction techniques that made the structure more resilient. Young boys who had thrown stones weeks before now watched in fascination as Chayton demonstrated how to notch logs properly. On the 5th day, as the roof was being completed, a lone rider approached. Clara tensed, but relaxed when she recognized the federal marshal's badge. It was a different marshal, younger, with kind eyes. "Mrs. Whitmore, I'm Marshal Foster. I have some papers for you." Clara took them warily, then gasped. "This is a deed transfer for the Morrison Ranch. Seems Mr. Morrison owes considerable fines and restitution. His property's being sold to pay debts, as his primary victim. You have first right of purchase at a lawful price." Foster smiled. "Quite a bargain. Actually, prime grazing land, good water, room to grow." Clara looked at Taza, seeing her own amazement mirrored in his eyes. From burned out of her small homestead to potentially owning one of the largest ranches in the area, the reversal was dizzying. "We'll take it," she said firmly. "We'll need land for all those children." Foster's eyebrows rose slightly, but he just nodded. "I'll file the papers. Congratulations, ma'am, and—" He looked at Taza and Chayton. "Welcome to the community. Gentlemen, may you find peace here." That evening, as the house stood complete but for finishing touches, Reverend Brennan returned. With him came Martha, Sam Wilkins, and the Hartleys, all the souls who had stood by them. "Figured you might want to bless the new house?" the Reverend said with a knowing smile. "Maybe make some other blessings official while we're at it?" Clara looked at Taza, who nodded slowly. They discussed this possibility, hoping but not quite believing. "Chayton," Taza said formally, "would you stand as my witness?" "Brother, I'd be honored." Chayton replied, emotion thick in his voice. "Martha?" Clara asked. "Would you stand with me? I've been waiting for this moment since I first saw how he looked at you." Martha said, tears already starting. They gathered before the new house, under stars just beginning to emerge. Reverend Brennan opened his worn Bible, but then set it aside. "The words in here are good words," he said, "but tonight calls for words from the heart. Taza, Clara, speak your truth to each other and to these witnesses. Taza took Clara's hands, his voice strong and clear. Clara Whitmore, you gave me shelter in a storm, but more than that, you gave me shelter in your heart. You saw not Apache or white, not stranger or friend, but simply a man in need. Your courage humbles me, your strength amazes me, and your love has remade me. I pledge my life to yours, my heart to yours, my future to yours, in the way of my people and yours. Before these witnesses and the Great Spirit, I take you as my wife. Clara was crying openly now, but her voice remained steady. Taza, you brought life back to my dead world. You showed me that surviving isn't living, that safety isn't worth loneliness, that love is worth any risk. You've stood by me against hatred and fear, chosen me above your own safety. I pledge my life to yours, my heart to yours, my future to yours. Before God and these dear friends, I take you as my husband. Reverend Brennan smiled broadly. Then by the power vested in me and the grace of God who loves all his children, I pronounce you husband and wife. What God has joined, let no man tear asunder. Their kiss was met with cheers and tears from their small gathering. Chayton whooped and fired his gun in the air in celebration, making everyone laugh. One more thing, Taza said when they parted. He pulled out the small wooden horse he'd been carving. For our future, for hope. Clara clutched the toy to her chest, laughing and crying simultaneously. For our future, she agreed. The celebration lasted well into the night. The Hartleys had brought their fiddle, and soon people were dancing on the packed earth that would become their porch. Clara danced with her new husband under the stars, feeling his strong arms around her, seeing the joy in his normally serious face. No regrets? She asked softly. Only that it took so long to find you, he replied, spinning her gently. But perhaps we both needed to become who we are first. And who are we now? Free, Taza said simply. Free to choose, free to love, free to build something new. Later, much later, when the guests had gone and Chayton had tactfully made his bed in the barn, Clara and Taza stood before their new home. It was smaller than the Morrison ranch house they'd soon occupy, but it was theirs, built by community hands, blessed by acceptance, and sanctified by love. Welcome home, Mrs. Clara paused, realizing they'd never discussed surnames. Stone, Taza said. I chose it years ago when the agency required English names, solid, enduring, shaped by time but not broken by it. Clara Stone. She tested the name. I like it. Strong, lasting, like us. Taza agreed, and led his bride into their new home, into their new life, into a future that just weeks ago had seemed impossible. Through the window, the last embers of the blessing fire glowed like red stars, bearing witness to the triumph of love over fear, acceptance over prejudice, and the courage of two souls who dared to choose each other against all odds. In the barn, Chayton played soft music on his flute, a song of celebration and new beginnings. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Running a ranch, building a life that bridged two worlds, perhaps facing those children with brown skin and green eyes. But tonight was for joy, for love, for the simple miracle of finding home in another's heart. And in the great tapestry of the West, where stories of struggle and survival were woven daily, the thread of Clara and Taza's love would run bright and true, a testament to the power of opening one's door and heart to the unexpected gifts that storm winds might bring. Thank you all for listening to this story of love conquering fear in the Old West. I'd love to hear where you're enjoying this tale from. Please share your location in the comments so we can connect with fellow listeners around the world. Don't forget to subscribe to Wild West Campfire for more stories of courage, romance, and adventure from the American frontier. What did you think of Clara and Taza's journey? Share your thoughts below. Your comments mean the world to us.